Hey everybody, this is the fourth here, and welcome to part 1 of my Hardstyle kick tutorial series. In this part, I will be explaining how you should choose or create the source kick sound that you will be distorting into your final Hardstyle kick. So there are a few different formats you can use for your source kick, and these are a sample, a drum machine, or just a standard synthesizer. So I'm going to start off talking about drum samples. So when you're using a sample to make your hardstyle kick, you probably want something that's synthesized and tonal. And 909 kicks are very popular to be used for hardstyle kicks. And a 909 kick sounds something like this. So you can see over on the spectrum, it has a really solid tone, as opposed to a huge pitch drop or a lot of different frequencies. And that's probably what you want. And then you also want to make sure that the kick sample has a long enough decay time. So for the decay time, you just want to make sure that at the tempo of your song, so for example, let's say I'm making my hardstyle song at 150 beats per minute, you want the tail of the kick to extend long enough to pass the next kick, at least slightly. So this is a good example of a long enough kick. But this kick, you can see over here, and you can also hear that it doesn't have a long enough tail, where this one does. And that way, once you're distorting it, you have that bass completely through until the next kick hits, which really gives you that full bass hardstyle sound. And then the final thing to pay attention to is you really want to use a fairly high quality and clean kick sound. And that's because once you start adding your distortion and other effects, any background noise, any layered sounds, or any kind of fuzz will be amplified a lot more. And what was, a subtle hiss is now really in your face and kind of distracting from the sound. And you probably don't want that. Maybe you do want that kind of sound, but even if that is the kind of sound you want, I would suggest you still use a clean kick and then introduce that sound manually with either synthesized white noise or a bit crusher plugin, because that will just allow you a lot more control over that sound. So here's an example of a kick. It has a very subtle hi-hat layered in the background. And you can see once I start putting on my effect chain, the hi-hat is a lot more present than it was before. And you probably don't want that kind of sound. Now, to ensure you're getting a clean kick sound, if you really like how 909s sound for hardstyle kicks, you might want to use a drum machine. Because not only will this ensure a cleaner sound, but you'll also be able to customize the character of the kick. So I personally don't use drum machines. I use Citrus, but a really popular drum machine VST is Drumazon. And Drumazon is really a 909 emulator, so it can get you those 909 kick sounds. And if you do choose to go with a drum machine VST, you should pay attention to some of the points I make while explaining how to synthesize your own kick, because they will definitely be relevant if you are using a drum machine VST. Okay, so if you want to use a synthesizer, which is really what I recommend just because it gives you complete control over the sound, there are a few things you should pay attention to, and I'll be walking you through the whole process of making a synthesized kick while explaining each of those things. Okay, now you can do this in pretty much any synthesizer, Citrus is my go-to synthesizer, so I will be making it with Citrus. Okay, so I've loaded up the default preset. Now, the first thing you want to do is get your preset into the bass. So I'm just going to change the master pitch and then also the pitch of operator 1. And now I have a nice bass tone. And then you want to select your waveform. Now, when selecting your waveform, it's really important that you have the second harmonic. So just a basic sine wave is going to have only the first harmonic. But in Citrus, I can go into the oscillator harmonics and add in the second harmonic. And you'll see there are now 2 tones. And there are different ways you can do this. You could layer another waveform over the original one that is an octave above. Or if you're using an additive synthesizer, just like I did in Citrus, you can tell it to play the second harmonic. Or you can select a waveform that has the second harmonic in it. So, a saw or a filtered saw, or not a square, but a pulse that isn't a square. And I tend to go with something between a triangle and a saw. So something like that. And the reason this second harmonic is so important is because of how it changes the character when you introduce distortion and equalization. So you can hear this is a kick. And it has some effects on it. It doesn't have any harmonics. If I turn off the effects, you can see it's just the one harmonic. And because it only has that one harmonic, it's not going to sound as deep as it would if it had that second harmonic, and it'll also be more difficult to get a unique character from it. So you can see, even with all of these distortion and EQs, it's kind of hard to get it to sound much different than a square. Like, I can kind of change the character, but not as much as if it had that second harmonic. And there will be more about the distortion techniques in part 2. But let's get back to making the kick. So once you have your waveform, what you want to do is create a pitch envelope. And the envelopes are going to work differently in other synthesizers, but hopefully you should know how to get just a basic downward envelope, because that's what you need for a hardstyle kick. And the way I like to have my envelopes, rather than just a quick downward envelope to flat like this, is to have something a little bit longer, but with a steep curve. And this is just because as the pitch changes very slightly through here, it will just give the kick a lot more character than if it went straight to being a static pitch. And then you can adjust the amount of the pitch envelope to get a more punchy kick. And this is pretty important because it's not always the case, but I have found quite often that the top of your pitch envelope will set the character a bit more for the kick. So if you have less of a pitch envelope, you will get a deeper, darker kick. But if you have a higher pitch envelope, you can kind of hear that talk sound already. And with the higher pitch envelope, it sounds more high-pitched, more punchy, but with a lower pitch envelope, it's a little bit deeper. And you don't have to get anything perfect if you're synthesizing a kick right now, because you can always go back to the patch once you start adding effects to kind of change it even more to see how it sounds after you have some effects on it. And then once you have your pitch envelope, you want to have a volume envelope. And you can use different types of volume envelopes. Usually I will have it look very similar to the pitch envelope. So a very steep curve. And that's just because once you start adding distortions on it, if you have too much sustain on your kick, the character of your kick won't change as much over time. Because the key of the hardstyle kick sound is how the volume envelope plays with all the distortions and EQs and all that stuff. And that's what really gets your character. But you definitely can get a good kick from other types of envelopes, which you'll be able to download an example of one kick that I made later on in this tutorial series. And then, just like with selecting your kick sample, you want to make sure it's long enough. So just make sure, like, when you play it, that the tail plays through until the next kick hits. So now you pretty much have your synthesized kick sound. And the final tip I have to give you about using a synthesized kick is to play it in the pitch of your song. So if I'm making a song in the pitch of G, I would play it on the G. And this is just because, when you're shaping the kick with the distortions and EQs and whatever other effects you're using, you're going to be shaping it to the pitch that you're playing the kick on. And if you're doing that in the key of your song, then the character you create with that kick will transfer over perfectly into your song. Because, when you pitch your kick, if you do it right, it shouldn't change the character too much of the kick in terms of the relative harmonics, but, it will still sound different at a different pitch. So if you're trying to make a dark kick for a song in the pitch of A, but you're making that kick all the way down at G, then the character might not transfer. It might not sound as dark at the note A as it did at G. Where if you make the kick in pitch A from the start, you'll be able to get that dark sound from the beginning exactly how you want it. Alright, so now you should be ready for part 2, where we get into the distortion. Thanks for watching my tutorial video. I hope you found it to be helpful. If you want to learn more, be sure to subscribe to my channel so you can watch new videos as soon as I upload them. After that, check out the Beat School website. I'll have the link in the description. All my tutorials are organized on the site so that you can easily find what you need by browsing through the different categories. There are also a ton of awesome resources to help you in every aspect of music production. And if you want to help support me, you can buy any of my sample packs, preset packs, or project files for only $5 or less. This gets you some great sounds for a great price and allows me to spend more time making these tutorials and working on the website. Thanks again for watching my video, and have a great day.